figuring out that I do have an addiction to adrenaline and risk. And I want to go back ultimately, and I want to redo my war. I want a do-over. I want to fix it again. As if you're writing a story, I want the ending to come out differently.
A former Special Forces warrior gets drawn back into uniform by the lure of adrenaline, of risk, and by the desire of so many Vietnam veterans for a different outcome.
There's just that attitude of like, I gotta get out of the barracks, and like, my girlfriend will be here, it'll be okay.
And in our second story, a young Marine downrange in Iraq gets the feared and in the military legendary and all too common Dear John. Hello and welcome to the Mighty Pen Podcast. I'm David L. Robbins, your host and founder of the Mighty Pen Project, a free writing program for veterans and their families, in partnership with the Virginia War Memorial Foundation here in Richmond, Virginia. In this podcast, I'll sit down with Dan Thompson, who served in the Special Operations Group in the Vietnam War, mostly behind enemy lines. Dan is the author of our first story, Color Red. After our interview, I'll be joined by Chip Louderback, like Dan, a veteran of the first ever Mighty Pen Project writing class back in 2015. Chip, a Marine who served in Iraq during the War on Terror, is the author of our second story, Post Awesome. Let's listen now to Dan Thompson's Color Red, read by Dean Knight.
I sat buckled into my seat in the hold of a C-7A Caribou heading to My Lock near the Laotian border, 1968. I was wedged against boxes of lerp and sea rations, ammo cans, and a tightly tethered water buffalo with a brass nose ring. The camouflaged bush plane smelled of dung and ammonia, crated chickens. The Caribou, designed for short takeoff and landings, drifted, dropped, and rose again in the Asian thermals as the powerful flanks of the buffalo edged ever closer. The Pratt & Whitney engines strained as the plane lifted and fell. I glanced upstairs into the cockpit as it rattled and rolled. The co-pilot knitted his brow and studied his checklist. I strained to see out the port window as the din and discord of hydraulics squealed, flaps lowered, engines slowed, and wheels dropped. At last, the tailgate folded down, exposing a vast checkerboard of emerald paddies and rolling hills and jungle. I stood, intrigued, removed my web gear, and stepped perilously close to the ramp's edge. Allured by the vivid splash of colors, I slipped my hand through a nylon handhold and looked down. The plane bucked violently. My tethered hand felt a vicious tug. My feet lifted, and my body stretched into the slipstream. A rider hung on a Brahma bull. My arm shook until my hand tore loose, and I tumbled through space until I arced my back into a stable free fall position. I was exhilarated and amazed that I was alive as I studied the ground and hurtled towards a bright red strip of clay surrounded by jungle green. I reached for my ripcord and realized I had no chute. The screen went red. I awoke, took a deep gulp of air, and sat up in bed. "Same dream?" said a soft voice. I felt the soothing touch of a hand rub my back. "Yeah," I said. "Same dream. Go back to sleep." "It's all right," said the voice. "Yeah," I said. "Just a dream. Nobody gets hurt." I sat at my desk in the small bullpen at Harrison Realty. Directly behind me sat Big Lynn's office, a square window with Venetian blinds always drawn. When he held court, his voice boomed like the Wizard of Oz. Big Lynn fought with the 504th Airborne Regiment in Italy during World War II. How many times had I listened to the same stories? "Well, you're in the mountains, on the line in winter for 66 days. He closed his left eye when he talked, as if sighting a rifle. "The Germans called us devils in baggy pants." Big Lynn's chest expanded and his spine stiffened when he recalled his war. The phone rang as I read the Wall Street Journal. a habit developed from my brief but unspectacular career with Merrill Lynch. The starched white collar of my shirt was open as I cooled from an early morning workout at Nautilus Center. I'd abandoned the free weights of my youth for precision weight training machines. I reached for the phone as Colleen sashayed into the office. Her spiked heels left red bird tracks the length of the narrow room. She was Big Len's most productive real estate agent, had curvaceous credentials, and knew how to sell it. She ignored me and headed to the back room to make coffee. Harrison Realty, I smiled into the phone. Zig Ziglar, a combination of motivational speaker and zealot, said that customers could hear the smile in your voice. The wall clock read 8:28, early for Colleen. This is Major Evans. His voice was officious, verging on pretentious. I'm a career counselor at Oppersen in St. Louis. Your commission is about to expire. Send the paperwork when it's over, I laughed dismissively. I didn't recognize the voice, and it was way too early for a staff officer to be up, let alone cold calling. Anyway, Oppersen, whatever the hell that was, didn't have my address, where I worked, or what I did for a living. How could they? Is there any way that you would stay in the reserve? He asked. How'd you get this number? I strained for a clue. Is that you, Don? Maybe it was my old friend who served with the 173rd Airborne in Vietnam. He was prone to play prankster. He'd stuffed a dead seagull in the grill of my car after I hid one under his seat. We need a few good men, he said. Tried the Marines? I asked. I remembered how jarheads had almost gotten me killed a couple times, but I was never one to return the favor. Who put you up to this? What's your current home address? Street Without Joy, I said. I just finished Bernard Fall's book, Hell in a Very Small Place, The Battle of Dien Bien Phu, written 1966, the year I enlisted in the Army. It was a case study on how the French lost Vietnam in 1954, and a blueprint for our disaster. I understand your anger, he said. I talk with a lot of officers. I recognized the technique. Show empathy to gain trust, then ask for the order. Is this a fucking joke? As I listened to the mystery voice, Big Len pulled into the parking lot and stepped from his brand spanking new camper with a pop-up roof that slept six and had all the accoutrements of a home. The tires were freshly coated with clay, running boards and mud flaps spattered. Is there any way you'd stay in the reserves? He asked again. There is no fucking way, I said. Sweat dripped. I lifted a towel from my gym bag and wiped. Are we clear? You had good assignments. Special Forces, MACV-SOG, good OERs, line and staff duty. Good for whom? I rubbed my scarred little finger as I grew agitated. It was numb and curved like a scimitar. What don't you understand about no? You served in the 1st Infantry in Nam, the Big Red One. No sacrifice too great. Big Len nodded as he entered. Thin hair, broad shoulders, tweed coat, and striped tie. He headed straight for the back room. I reviewed your records, Evans said. I clamped my jaw and pressed my lips to the phone. Review this. I ain't fucking interested. I was surprised by the anger that resonated from my chest. Maybe you can help us get it right next time, he said. There won't be a next time. How does that go? Wars and rumors of war, but the end is not yet, he said. Well, I've beaten my bayonet into a timeshare. What about those hard-won memories, he asked. Here's one. I read in the journal where Uncle thinned the ranks, RIF'd officers with combat experience for the convenience of the Army, and now you need weekend warriors to take up the slack? Needs change in every business, he said, but there are benefits. Weekend drills, 2 weeks active duty, and then it's all the way with LBJ? I asked. What about the next Texas tough guy looking to play sheriff? If I found you a slot in a Special Forces unit, would you stay in? Special Forces. My throat cleared. Something shifted slightly, but I didn't take the bait. I wiped my face with my shirt sleeve. I'll see what I can do, Captain. His voice soothed. I knew an assumptive close when I heard one. It was right off the training tape, No doze, how to close. I didn't expect that from a major. My hair was on fire. No! I slammed the phone. My armpits were dark moons. I was anti-war, anti-army, anti-Nixon, anti-Republican, and we were just coming out of a recession. I had a family to feed and no intention of going into the reserve. Not now, not fucking ever. I walked to the rear of the office. Colleen stood with her back toward me at the coffee maker. Big Lynn stood close behind her. His hands slid down and away from her hips. He turned as I entered the room. Colleen straightened her crumpled collar, pulled it above her exposed neck, and walked into the main office. "Who's on the phone?" Big Lynn asked. He squinted with one eye. "Some major from St. Louis." "You know I don't abide that kind of talk in this office, no matter how despicable the character," he said. "They want me back in the Army." "People in hell want ice water," he said. His feet were spread, knees locked, drill instructor style. "Expect another war if the Trilateral Commission continues to foment." My eyes glazed over and I returned to my chair. I tuned out the rant about the Trilateral Commission and Bilderbergers. Even now, he was convinced Dr. Martin Luther King was a communist. His unchecked resentments had devoured him and everything around him, maybe even me. Colleen sat erect as a swan at her desk. Just above her upturned collar was a yellowish bruise. The major's phone call had sparked some latent thirst, ignored or denied. It was tantamount to a dry alcoholic watching a beer commercial. I looked down at my daily action planner. If you don't have daily objectives, you can't qualify as a dreamer. That's what Zig Ziglar said in See You at the Top. I knew about objectives. An infantry officer learns the importance of priorities, objectives, and regimen. Is that what he meant by getting it right? Did I have to believe in perpetual war or suspend disbelief? 2 words, special forces, threatened to pierce a facade of normalcy. I'd worked hard to rebuild my identity in the years since Vietnam. I'd remembered to forget. Too much remembering can kill you. I replayed the phone call. I prided myself on my forceful and unequivocal response. I'd sent a clear and convincing message that shored up my resolve. I dug through the bottom drawer of my desk and found Principles of Sun Tzu. I'd studied the book while working for Mother Merrill. My branch manager used Principles to inspire a new class of financial warriors. It turns out the client was the enemy, so I surrendered. I flipped through the pages to an underlined passage. Victorious warriors win first and then go to war, while defeated warriors go to war first and then seek to win. The Joint Chiefs never imagined a tiny third-world country would slay Goliath and rout the Philistines. I had greater appreciation for the vanquished. Big Lynn stopped beside my desk. "Colleen and I are going to preview some properties," he said. "We'll be back in a couple hours." "Which ones?" I asked. "We'll have a sit-down when I get back." Colleen strutted out the door, leaving a second set of bird prints. Big Lynn's brogans tracked behind. 2 months later, the dust had settled, and I had all but forgotten about the phone call. I hadn't mentioned anything to my wife, Elizabeth. It was March, and I'd moved on. The phone rang. "Who is this?" "Major Evans from Oppersen." "We've had this discussion," I said. "I pulled some strings. Found you a slot in a special forces company. I appreciate your persistence, but I'm not interested." But something between nausea and bliss informed my disposition. "Look, Captain, I've forwarded your 201 file to Company B, 3rd Battalion, 12th Special Forces in Richmond. They're expecting you for a Muta 5 drill next weekend." "Are you deaf?" I asked. "You know how hard it is to get an A-team commander slot? And you're doing this because the company has a jump late on this weekend." As tempting as that is, they just returned from England, training with the SAS. I've got commitments. You'll get more training in the reserve than you did in the regular army. For what? Maybe I was wrong, and this isn't for you, the major said. People change, lose their edge. Like you. This isn't about me, he said. It's what you bring to the party, your experience. Think about how you could impact unit readiness. Now, stand in the door. Like I said, green light, Captain. Not so fast. Well, that's a start. No chance. One chance, he said, at some unfinished business. All done, I said. You sure about that? He asked. Take this down. Anything to make you stop. I took down the info. Airborne. The phone clicked. He was gone. Silence rang in my ear. I crumpled the paper and threw it in the trash. That night, she found me rummaging through mildewed boxes in the cellar after I tucked the kids in the bed and told them a story. The writing on the boxes was indecipherable. I tore through boxes stacked along a parapet. Cinder blocks and sand reinforced the crumbling foundation. A sour smell of mold filled the dank basement. It's late, Elizabeth said. Her auburn hair shone in coppery light. Where's my jungle boots and camouflage fatigues? I tore open the soggy cardboard flaps. Going hunting? I've been assigned to a reserve special forces company. What? I report this weekend. I tore open another box. What are you talking about? She said. You had your fill of all that. I'm just going to check it out. I pulled out a crumpled set of jungle boots covered with a green sheen. What about work? The kids? Her eyes flashed. It's just one weekend, I said. I wiped the mold from a boot and pulled the dry, rotted lace. It snapped. Maybe that's a bad sign, she said. It's the reserves, for God's sake. I'm just checking it out. What does that mean? It's just one weekend a month. So you've already made up your mind. Well, maybe I can train some men to survive, she asked. Really? When were you going to tell me? I can't explain, I said. They called, offered a slot. You've got a slot, she said. A family slot. Right here. You know how hard it is to get an A-team? Life's a bitch. I know. She shrugged and retreated in silence. I'm just checking it out. Nobody gets hurt. Buckled in the hold of a C-7A Caribou, I stared across the floor at another A-team rigged for a combat jump with rucksacks and rifles. Ashen faces and drool betrayed their steely constitutions. An hour into the flight, the plane dropped precipitously into a roller coaster plunge, and I floated in zero gravity. I looked down the line at my newly assigned A-team as the plane reversed its plunge and lifted violently. My stomach compressed into a ball and tried hard to exit my ass. I gripped the seat webbing over my shoulder with one hand and the aluminum bar of my seat with the other. Each vicious shear and upward reversal torqued the aluminum frame as wing grommets groaned and innards sloshed. A slim-faced sergeant across the aisle looked at the ceiling. His Adam's apple bobbed rapidly. He swiped drool from his mouth. His pallid face and wondering eyes betrayed a desperate need to exit this plane. Some jumpers covered their mouths with both hands, struggling not to be the first to breach. If one man blows, we all go. The gangly co-pilot in a baggy flight suit climbed slowly from the cockpit. He sat and scooted along the floor with one hand over his mouth. His cheeks stretched like a trumpeter. He gripped the anchor line cable that stretched from the bulkhead to the tail of the plane. He floated momentarily and slammed to the floor. A stream of vomit shot across the floor. The air smelled of rotten eggs and Limburger. Puke splashed across the floor and triggered a spontaneous eruption of blowholes. I gagged and swallowed an acidy lump. The red light blinked on, and the jumpmaster yelled, "Stand up!" The tailgate folded down, exposing a checkerboard of black and gray. Barren trees brushed the gunmetal sky. The steady blast of cold air numbed the fingers and froze the toes. The jumpmaster shouted, "1 minute!" I careened against the bulkhead, slipping in the slick, viscous vomit as the plane rose and dropped. I gripped the nylon netting with the right hand and the static line in the left. A jumper slipped and crashed to the floor. I bent my knees and spread my legs, intent of ending this nightmare. The plane bucked and shimmied on the final approach. Green light lit to a chorus of groans. As I reached the edge of the ramp, I hopped and awaited the pop of the chute opening. I felt a savage jerk on my left arm, and my body unfurled like a banner. My head snapped back, and something ripped. I reached for the toggles of the MC-11, but one arm hung limp along my side. I pulled the other toggle, and my chute spun like a top. I drifted toward a set of electrical lines strung between two transmission towers. I blinked hard and tried to wake. As I fell to earth, I realized I had no control. Everything was red. I listened for her soft voice. Same dream? And the soothing rub of her hand on my back. It never came.
I'm joined today by Dan Thompson, the author of Color Red. Dan, listening to Color Red, I'm reminded of the tug of war that exists in every warrior's life that I've spoken to between the experience of being a warrior, trained, and then coming home and trying to find something similar to the thrills and the camaraderie and all that in your home life. And this story was, first of all, beautifully written, really evocative, and I enjoyed it a lot. But at the end, it all centers around your wife looking at you going, when were you going to tell me, right?
That's correct.
Recollect those moments when you were feeling the tug of Special Forces pulling you back, and then we'll talk about your Special Forces background.
Well, first of all, the story is set up so that there's tension about going back into the reserves. Most of us, after we returned from Vietnam, we wanted to finish school, get a good job, start a family, and go on. You know, too much remembering is not a good thing. And most of us just tried to turn that period of time, that very intense period of time for me, turn it off and forget it and put it away down into the boxes in the basement where I ended up going anyway. The tension is about not wanting to revisit that and also figuring out that I do have an addiction to adrenaline and risk. And I want to go back ultimately, and I want to redo my war. I want a do-over. I want to fix it again. As if you're writing a story, I want the ending to come out differently.
So that's what Evans appealed to. He calls you up and you're holding the fort, right? No effing way, no.
Right.
But then he hits you with Special Forces. Why was that your trigger?
Your body remembers. Your body remembers its addictions, even if you don't want to partake of the old addictions. Your body remembers. And at that moment, there was a jolt. Of course, you know, you're in denial, and you say, and I said, I'm not going back. You can't make me.
But here's the brand you like. Here's
exactly.
Here's the one you want most.
Yeah.
So no to this, no to this, no to this, to that, but Special Forces. Tell me about your Special Forces background, and then walk us through why that was so appealing to get back to.
Okay. I was volunteered to a top secret group in Vietnam, started by John F. Kennedy. In one of his first cabinet meetings, he wanted to start an unconventional war, a guerrilla warfare in North Vietnam because of the actions the North Vietnamese were going against the South Vietnamese. He signed a NSM, National Secret Memorandum, that started this organization called Operation OP-34. And that continued to develop until 1964, when the Special Forces arrived and took over that operation and that mission, which was both counterinsurgency along the Ho Chi Minh Trail and reconnaissance.
And your role in that was what?
And I had several roles in there. I was like a utility player on a baseball team. I was told where to go, when to go, except for one time. And that was in the last 4 months of my year when a recon team was wiped out. And the 1-0, the leader, was killed, and the 1-1 was killed. And there was no American leadership. I had 4 months to go. Nobody would sign up for this role with 4 months to go. I did. I took over the team. I ran missions, and luckily I came out alive, which most teams and most the losses were horrendous. Let's just say that.
So with respect to that, Major Evans catches you on the phone and he offers you more of that. And you go, maybe, yeah. Okay, I need you to connect the dots for me. What was it about your time in Special Forces that was your addiction? That was the thing that pulled you back.
Well, as I said, your body remembers. The addiction is there. I mean, you can be an alcoholic for 20 years. You still want that. You still want that drink.
Yeah, but I know what a drink is.
Yeah.
I don't know what Special Forces
Okay.
behind enemy lines is.
Well, let me tell you then. You get on a chopper. You have 6 to 8 men, indigenous, and 1 other American. And you fly across the river and into Laos, where there is no help. You were put down. You were a Daniel Boone put in the wilderness, and your objective is to find either reconnaissance or set up a trail watch or do a radio tap. Basically, you're alone when you put down. Nobody is there to help you. And most of the time, what happens is after a day, maybe 2, trackers will pick you up, and then it's a run. It's a run for your life for the next couple of days. And normally they catch you, they surround you, and you have to call in the ships to come get you. So you're running, you're eating maybe a meal a day if you're lucky. You're not sleeping any, and you're on an adrenaline push for 5 to 7 days. And that's what you're living off of. Your body remembers that.
Listening to you, Dan, I can understand how there's almost an athletic component to that where an athlete trains to be a hurdler, a swimmer. You got to gear up so hard to do what you just described. Man, coming home from that's got to be, look, coming home from any war as a combatant is unimaginable to a lot of us. So you've talked to us about the pull of being in uniform. Yeah. The pull of family life. Walk us through that.
Well, it's like anyone else. You have children, you have commitments. There's a daily routine. You got to bring home the bacon, and there's all those pressures of starting out a career or just earning money. The tension builds when all of your efforts are not going into that production of what you've signed up for, what you've committed for, and you're pulled away. And that's where the tension builds.
But the pull of time in uniform and the pull of the spouse and the home and the responsibilities.
Right.
In this instance, the uniform, it wrestled it to a tie at least.
Yes.
Give me that.
Well, in the end, it wasn't a tie because in the end, I had to make a choice. And it wasn't conscious, I don't believe, at the time, but his words, the major's words, won me over. He planted the seed. The guy was clean for many years, and he sees a pusher on the street, and he goes with the pusher.
And Major Evans said to you,
Yeah.
Maybe this isn't for you.
Yeah.
We're done.
Yeah. That was a challenge.
Yeah.
That was a challenge to my manhood, to what I'd done. He knew what I had done. He would not have seen a 201 file like that very often. There just weren't that many of us that did this. He wanted that expertise in to bring up the unit level.
And you wanted it.
Reluctantly.
Yeah. Dan, I want to thank you for coming in. It's a wonderful story. You're a good friend and a great writer.
Thank you very much. I can attribute much of my my learning to MPP, and you, David, for those of people and veterans that want to tell a story or learn to tell a story, because it's not as easy as you think. Just it takes time, but I would highly recommend anybody that wants to do this type of work to come into the MPP class. They won't be disappointed.
This ad paid for by Dan Thompson. Thank you, Dan. Those are kind words.
Yeah.
Now we'll hear Chip Lauterbach's story, Post Awesome, also performed by Dean Knight. After that, I'll talk with Chip.
I felt the kick, but it might not have been the first. Get up. We got a brief with Staff Sergeant Lopez. I opened my eyes. Lar looked down on me with his death stare. Hurry up. Be in the COC in 5. He hurried out of the tent. My watch read 20:40. I got up silently. Aside from the other team leaders rising, the tent had an eerie stillness while the rest of the Marines slept. They looked dead, but also happy. I longed for that death-like sleep. We had only been here for a few hours after patrolling from Saipan all day long, zigzagging through the streets, talking to the locals. I cracked my neck, pulled my notepad out of the utility pouch on my plate carrier, and joined Marty and DiCarlo outside. Crunching over the gravel courtyard through the damp darkness, I lit a cigarette. COP Turbot, the home of the command element of Lima 39, was named in honor of Corporal Jacob H. Turbot, a combat engineer who died a year ago during the initial assault on Marja. His portrait was placed beneath the flagpole as a reminder. A hastily thrown-together outpost, Turbot was situated on the northern edge of the city's massive local marketplace, the only thing still somewhat standing from the pre-Soviet era. The combat outpost consisted of 2 abandoned mud brick compounds merged into one via a knocked-out wall. There were 2 entry points, one for vehicles, one for footmobiles. Marines manned 5 of the 6 guard posts. The last one was occupied by the ANA to show that the Marines were simply here helping the glorious and successful Afghan National Army. If the Taliban wanted, they could easily toss a hand grenade over a wall and ruin the tiny gym that the Marines had here. The dog and pony show was strong at COP Turbot. Aside from FOB Marja, this was the only location that State Department officials and members of Congress visited. Haircuts, shaves, boot blousings, and bunk checks were of more importance than maintaining a combat mindset. For a lot of guys, this was not the place to be. I followed DiCarlo and Marty down a long corridor in the center of a maze of rooms that included living quarters for the company staff, the Command Operations Center, a briefing room, and, most importantly, the Morale, Wellness, and Recreation Room. The NWR was a sacred site, home to the only computers with internet, a luxury for those of us who had only snail mail and satellite phones that rarely worked. We entered the COC to await further word. I leaned in the doorway until a hand grabbed my shoulder from behind. Hey, fatty, the snacks are over in the kitchen area. This is where decisions get made. You must be lost. I spun to give Sills a big hug, the first time in 2 months I'd seen him. Sills asked, You guys are going to be going along with the 1st platoon on the snatch and grab? I guess. Lopez is supposed to brief you guys any minute now. Did you talk to Karen on Valentine's? Yeah, she's good. We chatted on the sat phone back at Saipan, but it kept cutting out. Staff Sergeant Lopez stuck his head into the COC. All right, dummies, we're moving this brief down the hall. I shook Sills' hand. I'll come find you later tonight. Try not to get killed sitting in the air conditioning. Don't die on the toilet like Elvis, you fat bastard. We filed down the dark hall into a red-lit room to gather around a small table and an open map. Lopez checked over his notes one last time. Everybody here? Duke, Conrado, Lar, you guys got all your team leaders here? Yes, Staff Sergeant. Staff Sergeant, we're all here. Kill. Okay, do we have the guys from CAT here? Where are my vehicle commanders? All good, Staff Sergeant. In the back of the room stood a few Marines from the combined anti-armor teams, vehicle-mounted, tank-destroying boys with enough firepower to take over a small country. Afghanistan had no serious heavy armor threat, so these killers were relegated to providing blocking security and running the mail. Pay attention, because I'm only doing this once. The rest of the company is going to be joining India Company while they push to open up their AO. Meanwhile, we get the fun stuff. We'll be setting in a cordon and searching the center of this cluster of compounds to our west. Corporal Lar, you and your guys will be in the outer cordon providing security with Cat. Now, your job is to set up checkpoints. Keep an eye on anybody going in and out of that area. Sergeant Conrado, your squad will be on the inner cordon. You'll be the support element for Duke's squad. Sergeant Duke, you and your guys will search this compound that we believe, based off of intel, is where the Taliban are hiding either an IED cell, a high-value target, or both. Since this was just handed down the grapevine to me, the operation is going to be called O.P. Lopez because I wrote the damn order. Questions? Staff Sergeant surveyed the room. Time on deck is now 21:05. We step off at 0200. Get some rest. Lars said, "My team leaders hang back." Everyone else shuffled out like cattle. "Make sure all you guys are topped off in water and check their weapons to make sure they've been cleaning them. DeCarlo, you're going to be with me doing checkpoints. Marty, your team is going to hold on the right. Lauterbach, you're on the left. Keep McDonald's machine gun offset from the road, covering the avenue of approach. If any vehicles rush us, light them up before they get closer than 100 meters. Okay? So we know what to do? Go get some sleep." Walking back to the tent, Marty asked, "You guys think it's just a little strange we're doing a snatch and grab, but we don't know if the target's even there or what the target is?" DeCarlo stuck a pinch of dip into his lip. "I was thinking the same thing. It seems like a wild goose chase." I kept silent, not thinking about the mission at all. I was thinking about Karen. I made up my mind to call her after I checked over Mac and the machine gun. Our conversation on Valentine's Day a few days earlier had been interrupted several times with flyovers by Apaches and Blackhawks. Maybe they had jamming instruments running, because every time they got close, the SAT signal dropped. I woke Mac up to brief him on what we were doing later that night and to make sure his gear was set. Mac was less than thrilled. "So, we're just chilling by the road with no guarantee that we're going to be shooting people. Not interested. See if they can do this one without me." The other teams started to grumble as they awoke. They moved around, prepping for the mission. No one was happy about setting in a cordon during the middle of the night. The increased risk for IEDs wasn't what made night missions hated. It was the mud, worse than daytime. That, plus the fact that even with night vision, you still couldn't see all that well. I left to go see my friend Stamper. He moved a stack of magazines off his bunk so I could sit with him and his roomie, Wright. The three of us passed the next few hours talking about things going on in the world back home, how we missed our wives, what our plans were for when we rotated out. I left them close to midnight and tried to figure my way back through the maze of corridors, rooms, and tents. In the gravel courtyard, I met Harkrider and Nanner. Both came sprinting up to me. "Where the fuck you been? We've been looking all over for you. Lars pissed. The word changed and he sent us to find you." "How long?" 20 minutes. We jogged back. I braced for the worst. Lar despised not having accountability of his Marines, especially his team leader. I entered with false cheer, like nothing was wrong. "Hey, I heard word changed. What's up?" "Where were you?" "I was with Stamper and Wright in their hooch." "You have any plans to go back out?" "Just to the MWR to use the computers." "Battalion said we need to have an Afghan face on this operation, and we now have to brief the ANA and the AUP and give them time to get ready. We're not staged until 0600, rolling out at 0630. "Really? Well, that's good. It gives me a chance to call my wife and get some sleep." "So wait, you're not pissed at me?" "For what?" "For being hard to find. Nanner and Harkrider said you're furious because it took them something like 20 minutes to find me." "What? The word changed like 5 minutes ago. I sent them out to find you. You ran in like 30 seconds later." Harkrider and Nanner doubled over laughing. With my patience thin, I made my way over to the MWR. I sat at an outdated black laptop and logged on Facebook. I had a bunch of old messages, but surprisingly, there wasn't anybody on. Afghanistan is 8.5 hours behind America, and it was just after midnight Afghan time, which meant 3:30 p.m. in the States. I sent Karen a message, posted some pictures, then jumped on one of the phones to try to reach her. She didn't answer, so I figured she was either working or training for a 10K next month. I stayed at the computer to kill time, looking at all the things I wanted when I got back. Motorcycles I would never buy, rifles I would buy. I tried Karen again. Like before, it went to voicemail. What was going on? She knew any time a weird number called, it would be me. Was she okay? I was getting frustrated that I couldn't get through. I'd called 5 times, sent a few messages, but I didn't get any response. I worried something might have happened. Before long, it was 05:30, which meant I'd spent all night on Facebook and the phone, not sleeping like I should have been. I returned to the tent to get ready with everyone else for the staging area. Someone with a lot more brass on their collar decided we would be inserted by 7-ton trucks, which, given the short distance and the fact that there was always an IED risk, seemed to be a less than thought-out plan. Coming down the road in loud 7 tons would cost us the element of surprise and give any Taliban plenty of time to get out of there. After loading up and waiting, I smoked constantly to stay awake. I even emptied an MRE coffee pack into my lip like tobacco to get a caffeine jolt. The sun came up and we all knew this mission was a shit show. I sat in the 7-ton dazed and kicking myself for losing track of time. I told myself it was cool. I'd had sleepless nights before. We pushed out a COP turbot and clanked our way down the dirt roads. In the back of the trucks, we were tossed like rag dolls. The uneven roads did not jive well with the suspension of the 7-ton. After a loud arrival, things got louder as we tried to unload in an orderly manner. No one was sure what the hell was going on. After orienting ourselves and getting away from the trucks, all surprise was gone. We walked to our checkpoint and set up the M240B on the far edge of a field adjacent to the road. There we waited. An hour later, Laura came over to move pieces around. Don't bunch up like that. Use some dispersion and give yourself like 30 meters or some shit. Set up in the field. You do know that a machine gun team is supposed to stick together, right? And if we're in the middle of the field, we'll have no concealment. Listen, dickhead, the entire fucking city of Marja knows we're here. And I don't give 2 flying fucks about machine gun doctrine. I'm more worried that if a mortar or a grenade lands around here, the next thing I know, I got 2 dead Marines who are more interested in being cuddle buddies than they were with staying alive. Max stood. He has a good point. See ya, boss. He walked into the middle of the field. I felt like nothing was working the way it was supposed to. Nothing made sense, as if we were just wandering around this war zone and running check-the-box missions to help advance someone's career. If we got lucky, or if we stumbled on the enemy, then we could shoot them and pat ourselves on the back. Afghanistan was turning me into a cynic. I laid down my head to clear my thoughts. Well, my team leader has shown his ass and is sleeping on the job. Max stood over me. The 240 on his shoulder reminded me of Christ with his cross. Fuck off, dude. I just put my head down a few seconds ago. I heard you snoring all the way in the field, and I've been standing here for a minute. I was beyond horrified. If Mac could walk up on me like this, so could a Taliban fighter. I could have had my throat slit. Even worse, I put all my friends in harm's way. Don't worry, I won't say anything. Max sat next to me and lit 2 cigarettes, one for me. You doing okay? Why didn't you get enough sleep? I kept trying to get in touch with Karen. Before I knew it was time to stage. And see, that's why I don't talk to Alex when we go out to do ops. Of course, because I don't call that often, she spends a good chunk of our time bitching, asking like, can't you come home sooner? I swear, dude, that shit makes me lose my mind. I just freaked out because Karen is usually good about answering her phone. I'm worried something might have happened to her. If we ever get out of this fucking field, I'm sure you can get in touch. Max sat with me for another 45 minutes. We smoked, and every once in a while I walked to the vehicle checkpoint to see how things were going and avoid nodding off again. After another 2 hours, we received word that the targets had fled. There were no IED materials to be found. Mac and I laughed, picked up our packs, and regrouped with elements from 1st Platoon in a small courtyard. Everyone joked that because we told the ANA, the Taliban knew we were coming. Instead of returning to Turbot, we humped to Saipan, where we had a scheduled post-rotation. It took us another 3 hours to make it there, just in time. Before climbing up the ladder to Post Awesome, I snatched a sat phone for one more call to Karen. Hello? Hey, baby, how's it going? Hey, I'm good. Sorry I missed your calls. How are you? I'm doing okay, about to go on post, but I just wanted to talk to you real quick. I was a little worried when I didn't hear from you. I'm fine. It's no need to worry. That's good. Actually, I'm glad you called, because I wanted to talk to you about something. Sure. What's up? I don't think I can do this anymore. Do what? Us. What do you mean? What the fuck? What happened? I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore. What do you mean? Are you seeing someone else? That's none of your business. I'm your husband. Of course it's my business. His name is Anthony. Are you being serious? Or are you fucking kidding me with this shit? This isn't a joke. Who the fuck is this asshole? For one, he's a nice guy. He doesn't drink as much as you. And he doesn't talk about killing people all the time. Baby, don't do this to me. Not while I'm over here. Please, just wait until I get home. Chip, I'm sorry. She hung up. I sat on the ground. I turned at movement behind me, and for once Lar didn't look angry. He was silent, with a friendly expression. Bad news? The wife's leaving me. I've been there. Want me to talk to Staff Sergeant Medina? We can get you pulled back to Turbot. With that shit on your mind, you'll get yourself killed out here. I'm staying. You sure? Need some time to think? Maybe chill? I got post in 5 minutes. Asshole, listen. You don't have to pull this tough guy shit. Go back into your tent. Someone else will stand your watch. Nah, I'm good. The bottom line is I'm in Afghanistan. She's in the States. There's nothing I can do about that. I'd rather push on with my brothers who actually need me. That's what I like to hear. Stay sharp. We'll drop some bodies and you'll feel better. Plenty of fish in the sea. Lar went back into his hooch, and I climbed the ladder to Post Awesome.
I'm joined now by Chip Lauterbach, author of Post Awesome. Chip, you were in class number 1 of the Mighty Pen, 2015.
The original, yeah.
I'm going to tell an anecdote first before I ask you questions. I remember reading this story, and you know, these tales from veterans, as the podcast is demonstrating and as the archive demonstrates, they can be sometimes powerful tales, often. Yet this story, Post Awesome, got such a reaction in class. It's heartbreaking, your wife breaking up with you while you're serving overseas. All the stuff that goes with that, you know, the sense of betrayal, the sense of loss, the shock. And I remember when this came up, after we workshopped Post Awesome in that class, I remember the reaction that it got. Malik Kodari said to you, "Come on, Chip. You remember the song." And you'd upset yourself when we went this story. It's an upsetting story. And I remember you were red-faced and you were moved and reliving the hurt. And Malik says, "You remember the song." And you nodded somberly like, "Yeah, I know the song." And Malik started singing, "Ain't no reason to go home." And the whole class, Chip, the whole class pitched in. "Ain't no reason to go home. Jody got your girl and gone." And they sang like 4 verses
Oh, yeah.
of the Jody song about Jody being the guy that got your girl.
Yeah.
And it was the first time for me, Chip, in this first class, when I realized what we had done with the Mighty Pen is we'd created a unit.
Oh, yeah.
Is these men and these women got your back so naturally and so fast. I didn't have to say a word. And I was moved by that, by the support you got for this story. And over the years and over the many classes, it's always that way. Everybody gets everybody's back. But this story, Post Awesome, I remember was the first time I saw it. And for that reason, it's always been a really special story for me.
Well, I mean, it's a it's a common thing that happens, unfortunately. Honestly, like your girl sending you a Dear John letter or telling you like over the phone it's over, or like going back 2,000 years to the Roman legionnaires sending you a clay tablet, like that's just kind of, or a wax tablet. But it's a story that is as old as time when it's associated with war. And it's just like we've all seen like in movies where a guy gets a Dear John and it's this like heart-wrenching moment where he's like, I don't want to be here no more. And I'm sure that does happen to some people. The last time I checked the figures, I believe for E4 and below in the Marine Corps, there's a 95% divorce rate for if you get married in your first enlistment. It's just not a conducive life towards young marriage. You know, I know plenty of guys who have been in, they stayed in, they're advancing their careers. Yeah, they're making it work. But like, there's just that attitude amongst like 18, 19. I was 22 when I went in. I got married when I was 23. There's just that attitude of like, I got to get out of the barracks and like, my girlfriend will be here. It'll be okay. And they don't really usually set you up for success in those situations. Like, you have the family readiness officer from the battalion, but you don't like, they keep saying like, oh yeah, we're going to have a big family day. And then like the day it happens, they'll be like, oh, it got canceled. We're going to do like a 12-mile ruck march. Tell your spouses and family to stay back.
So for context, you were at Marja.
Mm-hmm.
In the Marine Corps lore, it used to be if you met a guy who was at Iwo Jima, you shake his hand.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's if you meet a Marine who was at Fallujah, you shake his
absolutely.
hand. But Marja was, my understanding, comparable to Fallujah in terms of.
Oh yeah, the intensity was crazy, and I will say that Fallujah, that was way more hectic and kinetic and squeezed into like a 3-week, 1 month time span. Marja just happened over the course of 2 years, and it was a slugfest constantly. I believe it was the Marines with 1-6 and 3-6 who went in at the initial stages of Operation Moshtarak in February of 2010. They were relieved by 2-6. I know all of this because my battalion was attached to the 6th Regiment. They stood up my regiment, but they didn't give us a regimental headquarters. So the 3 battalions of the 9th Marine Regiment were, here, you go here, you go here, you go here. And so we were just attached to other regiments.
Well, let me ask you this question. So referring back to post-awesome, you have a young friend, male, female, doesn't matter, and they want to join the Marine Corps. And they ask you for advice, and they say, Uncle Chip, Dad, should I get married? Would you say, I mean, if they have somebody they love, do you believe that love can survive things like Marja?
Maybe if you started dating her, maybe if you gave her a Valentine on Valentine's Day in 6th grade, and y'all stayed together from that point.
You're saying anybody that can love you at the age of 13 will still love you as a Marine.
Yeah, but that's about it. I mean, we have this joke in the Marine Corps, you know, if the Marine Corps wanted you to have a wife, they would have issued you one.
Right.
And like, that's real because like.
And you get to train.
Yeah. But yeah, like I said, the Marine Corps does make efforts to try to like be better about family readiness. But during like a buildup, 2 wars going on at once, those are some of the things that kind of fall behind the wayside. When I was stateside, you know, or when I was actually home at Camp Lejeune, like everything was fine. It was peachy keen, you know, Monday through Friday, I'm working, going to the field, whatever. And unless we have a crazy field op, I will be home Friday night, hang out with my wife on Saturday, Sunday. But there also wasn't a lot of opportunity for her.
Now, to this point, out of the Marine Corps, you have now graduated college.
Right now, yeah.
Yeah, you're a graduate of the Robertson School of Media and Culture.
Yeah,
from VCU. Yep.
I got a lot of really great opportunities through the Robertson School.
And you told me once you wanted to be the next Scud Stud. You want a chance to go back and be a combat reporter.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, when Ukraine kicked off, I started reaching out. I did a summer kind of like internship thing with it's called Transitions Online. It's a Eastern European news agency. They're based in Prague in the Czech Republic, and I went to Prague for a summer. One of the instructors that they had there was with Reuters,
Mm-hmm.
and I hit him up and I was like, "Hey man, I can get together like $3,000 and a flak jacket, and I can be in Poland near the Ukrainian border in like 3 days. Can like Reuters or somebody like help me out? Toss me a little bit of credentials?" And he was just like, "I would highly advise you to not go there." He was just like, "Don't do that."
Mm-hmm.
I even remember back when I was working the internship with him, I was like, I want to be a combat correspondent. I want to go places. I was actually fortunate enough to land a job working at CNN for a little while. And that was where I kind of opened my eyes to like it's not the good old days of journalism where you could I heard a story about while I was at CNN, Christian Amanpour. It was the early days of Iraq, and they were like, "No, we don't have the insurance for you. You can't go over there." So she just hopped on a plane to Jordan and got like a taxi to take her to the Iraqi border. And she called CNN and was like, "I'm here. So what's up? You guys want a story?" Can't do that anymore, apparently, which is kind of sad. I think the big heyday of combat journalists ended in the late 90s, early 2000s.
I want to thank you, Chip, for being part of the Mighty Penn family and writing one of the more powerful stories, and for me, one of the most memorable. And I really thank you for coming by, man. The Mighty Penn Project is a free writing program for military veterans and their families, offered by the Virginia War Memorial Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit. If you'd like to learn more about the Mighty Penn or just send us your thoughts, email us at mpodcast@vawarmemorial.org or use the link in the podcast description. If you're a veteran or a family member of a serviceman or woman listening to this podcast anywhere in America, and you want to learn how to best write and tell your own powerful stories, you can sign up for one of our Mighty Penn writing workshops on Zoom. If you want to read today's pieces and many more, use the link to go to the Mighty Penn archive. If you enjoy this podcast, please share it. Original music for this episode provided by Jackson Albrecht. Lastly, if you'd like to support the Mighty Penn's efforts to record and preserve these stories of service, adventure, and sacrifice, follow the charitable donation link in the podcast description. I'm David L. Robbins, and I want to thank you for listening to the Mighty Penn Podcast. It's an honor